stakeholder conversation about the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to everyone that's on the webinar. I'm Jody Harden. I'm with the Civic Canopy. I'm here with Bill Colton, also with the Canopy. We were asked by the Office of Early Childhood to help facilitate a series of 3 conversations with stakeholders about the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program. I'm going to go over the purpose of this series, and then we'll do a round of introductions so we know who's in the room, and then we will dive into today's conversation. The purpose of the series was really to create a space where we can build some shared understanding of the different perspectives around what's working and where there could be improvements or enhancements for the Child Care Assistance Program. I wanted to use the opportunity to provide an update on both federal reauthorization for child care as well as understand the state plan and the efforts currently underway in Colorado. And create the space where folks from across the state could weigh in, whether from a county perspective, a provider perspective, a family perspective, an advocacy perspective, around what's working well and where there could be some areas for enhancement. And at the end of the series of 3 meetings, which will be, there's one more scheduled in October, the idea is to have a set of recommendations or solutions that can be shared with Executive Director Vika for consideration. So we had our first meeting about a month ago. We'll recap that a little bit. Today is the second one, and then like I said, there's another one in October. So with that, we'd love to know who's in the room, and then we'll also share kind of the numbers of folks from across the state that are participating via webinar. So love to know your name, and then what your role is with CCCAP. So we'll start over here, Bill, and then we'll go down this row of names.
Civic Canopy and our role here is helping facilitate this process.
Kathy, I'm a director in Adams County.
I'm Angie, and I'm also a director in Adams County. Michelle, and I'm a center in Adams County, and I'm also a site coach for Adams County.
Terry Albo, and I manage the CCCAP program for Golden County.
My name is Dawn. I'm the elder coach.
I'm Megan Davis, also with Boulder County, and I'm a policy analyst and work on their human services outreach and operations.
I'm Pam Olson with Bravo County.
Glenn Chamber, Director of Brandon Jackson County.
And I'm the director of Kelly Morrison, I'm the administrator of CCCAP program in Montana.
Michelle Sharp, from the Chamber Council of Phillips and County, and I work with the writers.
Claudia Strait, director of Early Child Jobs for Eagle, Washington, and Carson counties and Ditto. Edie Green, CCCAP supervisor at County.
Bill Jager, I'm with Colorado Children's Campaign.
60 Howard with Fall Star Advocate.
As far as CEO of the National Centers for Father and Restoration Children and Centers and Moms. I'm Robin Smart. I'm the Joint Budget Committee Analyst for the budget that has the CCCAP program.
I'm Jenny Pinchville with Colorado Counties Incorporated.
I'm Alton Daly, all with Colorado Counties Incorporated.
Chris Rower, 2 child care centers.
Thanks, Bob. I'm my reader and
I'm Laura Heights. I work with Mary Lynn.
I'm Angie McClain. I'm with Marvel and the Council, and so I'm the folks do. Welcome, everyone. I'm Mary Lynn. I'm the director of the Office of Childhood, where we have lived. I'm Mary McClain. I'm the director of the Early Career Learning.
We just found out that the people on the webinar cannot hear the introductions.
Send the mic.
So, hi everyone, I'm Charlotte Brandy. I'm the President and CEO of Think Early Learning.
It might be over here.
So I'll be the last one they can't hear. I'm Charlotte Brandy. I'm the President and CEO of Think Early Learning. I'm also a And in that role, I was one of the co-chairs of the House Bill 1314, 1317, implementation task force for the changes that were made.
I'm Riley Kitts. I am the Department of Human Services Legislative Liaison, Legislative Analyst.
I'm Lauren Morales. I'm the Projects Coordinator of the Office of Early Childhood. And over here we have Lindsay Dornman, the Communications and Projects Manager for the office.
We'll let Lindsay introduce herself and we're going to test the mic.
Oh.
Okay. I'm Lindsay Dornman, Communications Manager, Office of Early Childhood. Well, that sounds so much better.
So where did we leave off here?
Thank you. And I'm Monique Alvaro, and I'm with the State Office of CCAP. And I'm Danielle Greer. I am also with the State CCAP Office.
I'm Greg Smith. I'm the CCAP Administrator for the Office of Early Childhood.
I'm Christine Lucero with Denver County.
Hi, I'm Walt Nelson, President and CEO of the Early Childhood Education Association. We represent private providers in all 64 counties throughout the state.
I'm Anna Cortez, Program Manager for Wall County. Melissa Ingalls, Program Manager, Douglas.
Anna Jo Haynes with Mount Higher Early Learning.
Vickia Collins, CCAP Data and Research Analyst.
Brett Reeder, Director of Strategic Operations for the Office of Early Childhood. Colin Tackett, Business Analyst with the Office of Early Childhood.
Stacy Kennedy, Director of Child Care Quality Initiatives with the Office of Early Childhood. Great, thank you. Is there anyone else who came in that's not introduced themselves?
Hi, I'm Jeanette Atterbury. I'm the Family Friend Neighbor Program Manager, and I'm here representing Lisa Houston at the Early Childhood Council Leadership Alliance. Megan Locktuck with the Rural Resort Region Northeast Early Child Council.
Jolene Butchler, and I'm the Executive Director of CAEYC. Thank you. Anyone else? Great, thank you so much. And how many folks do we have on the webinar, Lauren?
Right now, 33.
There's about 33 people participating via webinar. And we learned at the first meeting that for webinar participants to really be able to hear the dialogue, we're going to need to use microphones. So bear with us as we shuttle microphones around, but that's the best way for the folks online to hear. So how many folks in the room participated in meeting 1? Great, a good number, super. So at that meeting, and how many people tried to participate by webinar? Couldn't really hear? Great. Well, thank you for sticking with it. Coming to you. So at the first meeting, we spent a lot of time really grounding ourselves in what the current state of CCAP is. So we heard a lot from the Office of Early Childhood, who shared the impacts and what the reauthorization means, what currently is in the state plan, and how that's moving Colorado forward, and then spent some time really looking at data. So there was a survey that was sent out to counties to kind of get an idea of what some of the issue and pressure points are from county perspectives. So looked at that data along with some of the programmatic data to continue to flesh out a full story about what's going on with CCAP. We will continue to infuse data into this conversation. We decided not to bring any to this particular meeting, because when we talk about the purpose of this meeting, we want to continue to get ideas and perspectives from the field. The thought and the hope is that by the end of this meeting, we hone in on some areas that stakeholders really want to develop recommendations around. We'll bring data, relevant data, to that final meeting to help really hone in on those recommendations. And then we also had table conversations to look at issues and topic areas that were most relevant to folks and what were on people's mind. And so you have at the table a compilation of those topics. That is this document. So this synthesizes about 12 table conversations, trying to identify those topic or issue areas that came up across many tables
and gave some kind of related notes of what people were talking about or sharing in terms of that topic. This is the first cut of understanding what's on people's minds. The second cut is really today. We want to spend more time understanding the issues at play, spend more time hearing from various perspectives from the field. We'll do that in a couple of different ways. We'll have a panel that will share their perspectives, and remembering that a panel of 6 people is not the same as this full group, nor all the people on the webinar, but the panel will help us start to understand more in-depth perspectives from the counties, from providers, from advocates, from families. Towards the end of the panel, we'll also open it up to additional perspectives, ideas, and thoughts from this broader group in the room. Then we'll spend time based on the issues and topics that have been generated, having more in-depth tabled conversations around where people really want to spend time and energy getting to solutions and recommendations. So that is our flight plan for today. Again, by the end of today, we're hoping to have an idea of those recommendations so that in the final meeting in October, that's where we spend most of our time and energy is focusing on the recommendations that want to be put forward to executive director. With that, we're pleased to be able to have a variety of folks participate on the panel. If those folks want to come forward, seats up here.
No seat for you. You can have mine.
Oh, no, we have the chair.
Oh, I'm just going to give up mine. Okay.
There's 2 microphones. This is what we're going to use. Whoever takes these holding first does not have to be the first speaker, but I need 2 people to just go ahead and hold these. Thank you. Someone else hold them. Terrific. So we have the variety of people that are on the panel here, up on the slide. And actually, maybe it is worth everybody introducing themselves. We put names and faces together. So those of you who did volunteer to hold the mic, if you'll start.
Charlotte Bradley.
Diane Price.
Noel Nelson.
Not on. Can I try that again?
Lights on.
Now.
There you go.
Well, I think I'm still the same person. Charlotte Bradley.
Diane Price.
Noel Nelson.
Anna Cortez. Terry Album. Megan Davis.
Jerry Hahn.
We're done. Great, thank you. So we have a set of guided questions based on last month's conversations and the topics that came up. We'll start with these, and I think each of you will receive a copy of these. We'll try to hear from different perspectives around the same topic. So if a county is the first one to respond and share something, we might ask from a provider perspective, what does this mean or look like, or from a family perspective. So that in any topic area, we kind of get a well-rounded view. And again, be thinking if there are things that you want to add to the conversation, an additional thought or idea, or a perspective that you have to wrap things out. So the first thing we want to talk about is the capacity to serve. Oftentimes we talk about it, we talked a lot in August about how we maximize the number of families served by CCAP. And we oftentimes try to measure that in different ways. What's the number served? How do we do that by using swipe cards or the numbers enrolled over the course of a year? So before we go into just let's maximize the number, let's stop and reflect a little bit about what does that even mean to serve a family in CCAP? How do different perspectives think about service being served? And when we think about the number, increasing the number, what does that look like or mean from different perspectives? So we'd love to hear from counties, providers, advocates, and family. How do you think about serving children in CCAP? What are your goals around that? And how do you, what has been helpful in helping you achieve your goals or gets in your way? Who would like to start? Thank you.
Well, serve means anyone that is eligible for CCAP that needs care and is utilizing it for education, training, employment, self-employment, and also job search. Serve to us also means that educating the community on CCAP as well. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, talk a little bit about your goals around.
Sure. Our goals for CCAP are to ensure families are either employed, self-employed, in a training activity pursuing higher education for no more than 4 years, or actually doing job search, all for the benefit of achieving family stabilization, self-sufficiency, becoming school-ready, and maximizing or eliminating the need for government assistance.
Great. Other thoughts on how you consider what you think about when you think about serving or maximizing the number of children served? What does that mean to you?
I don't know. I'm going to respond if I can.
Yes,
to
please.
this. I'm sorry, Anna. So I wonder. I've been wondering about this a lot since we started all the work on it. Always wondered why CCAP. It says it's on. The light is on. So I just screamed on the Screaming out. Is this okay? Okay, it's closer. I apologize. So this whole idea is almost, well, I wonder if we aren't struggling with this whole philosophical shift we're seeing with CCAP. As I listen to what you say, Anna, it's been sort of the traditional way we've looked at people going to work, getting them to work, yet we are getting additional conversations from the federal government and the state government about school readiness, so that the two-generation approach that CCAP has become, yet philosophically it's going to be a real shift change for us, I think, in terms of maybe not so much for providers, because I think we've always kind of looked at it from the early education component and families going to work or going to school. If you're in a full-day, full-year program, that's at least how we looked at it. But I think, I wonder from the county perspective, again, I just wonder, is it going to be a shift in there? Are we going to have to start thinking about how we think differently about what it means to serve families, because it's not just the parent, it's the child when we talk about quality. And so that, I ponder that a lot, because I think that's one of the struggles we're having throughout the country, I imagine. I don't think it's just happening in Colorado, throughout the country, is that do we have enough money allocated for families of young children who need support? And what does that look like in any given state or any given community?
I'd like to sort of build on that as well. And I have to say, I was very intrigued actually by this question, because there are so many different pathways you can take it down in terms of the definition of serve. When a family is enrolled in culinary learning at either one of our two schools, we take a very comprehensive view to what's going to happen with that family and what the interactions are between our staff and that family, both the social work side of our teams, as well as the health side, as well as the teaching staff in our classrooms or in our home-based programs for that matter, which wouldn't be a CCAP-funded child. But we would consider to be serving that child in the context of that child's family, regardless of whether they might be absent on Monday, they're still being served by us, or if they forgot to swipe their card, they're still being served by us. So it's an interesting question in terms of what we mean by that as far as head counts versus what's actually happening for those families when they are enrolled. In the case of Clayton, which is true of some of my other colleagues up here, we're also at our core Head Start, really Head Start program. And so that comprehensive viewpoint of what it means to serve a child and family might be rather different from what you might be thinking about when you're only trying to determine based on how much average is paid out in CCAP per child, how many kids can be there for served. So it's a very interesting and I think a pretty complex question actually.
I definitely agree with that. I think that we've also talked a lot about that in Boulder County about the last, just that whole philosophical shift. Are we moving from a work support program to really a program that's supporting children and the family as a whole, and the holistic approach of who are we serving? Are we just serving that child for that day because the mother or father swiped the card? Are we serving that family as a whole, even children that may not specifically be in the CCAP program, but because we're stabilizing that family, everybody is being served. So that's how we kind of look at it.
Well, from a parent's perspective, one of the issues that has come up, and I've seen this many times, is since there's not affordability of benefits, even under the traditional CCAP program, or how it's defined as it stands, this, when, like for instance, a family's homeless, and this has actually happened to more than one of the families who have attended Mile High, they start out in one county, and they're homeless, and then they achieve housing outside in a different county, and they lose their CCAP because, oh, things have changed, they're no longer homeless, by the way, oh, they're working, it's a different income level, so they're back on the street where they started. And I'm not sure that that's in the best interest of the family of the child, of the program, or even of us as a society. That's where I'm coming from a lot of times, because I see that, I'd say at least 5 times a year, if not more, and that's the ones that I see because I'm in an office. I don't see the parents day to day, but it always concerns me when I know of things like that are going on, because there's no affordability between the counties.
And building on that, Mary, so you started tapping into what helps and maybe perhaps what gets in the way of continuously being able to support or serve children and families. I wondered if any of you would like to chat about what helps you achieve goals about continuous service, and what perhaps gets in the way.
In Boulder County, we've been able to achieve a pretty high rate of continuous care. I think it's mainly because we've worked really hard to create relationships with our providers so that it's not just for the CCAP program we're good in terms of the eligibility and needs for the care, but we actually work with our providers to create a relationship and then also help our families to develop those soft skills to deal with their providers as well. And it's a trifecta of service, that it's not just one thing does one thing and one thing does another, but really working on those skills with parents to talk to their providers when they're having issues, instead of just getting a notice 3 months down the line that somebody hasn't paid their parent fee or somebody isn't swiping the card, trying to nip that stuff early so that we can go out and provide a service to our families to say, hey, can we help you learn how to use that machine a little better? Or can we work with the provider to help the family discuss how to make a payment plan, all those kind of things. So, not just providing a monetary benefit to these families, but providing a case management kind of approach.
I appreciate that you do that. I think that's wonderful. I wonder how that works with other counties, if they're able to do that kind of approach. What's the capacity that counties have to be able to do that? I know from our perspective, we're a not-for-profit organization, so we raise money, and we just raise more money because we have to be able to have our staff there all the time and be the quality that we want to be. But if you're a for-profit organization, you may not have the flexibility of going out for donors or grants or things like that, and it becomes a struggle. And then the internal administrative capacity that centers might or might not have. If you're a large organization, you like Clayton or Early Connections, there's an infrastructure that can support the business side. We made that an aspect of the work we do. But if I were just an individual center, by myself, I'd be doing that by myself, and I probably would be pretty bad at it. Because I think that that's generally, we have some business, the model is kind of broken in terms of how we provide administrative support for a lot of centers.
First, I'd like to say that one thing that is working better, one thing that's working much better is as we work through the development of a point of sale or the swipe card system, that has lifted quite a bit of the administrative burden that we see in our child care centers. However, I will tell you that our membership shares with us that if you've got a center that's licensed for 175 children, just as an example, and you're processing the CCAP paperwork the required process of going through the motions to make sure that you're billing accurately, to make sure that there's no question in regards to what's being submitted to the county, coupled with the food program, with a center with 175, let's say 125 of those children are CCAP. It takes between 35 and 48 hours a week to be able to process, just go through the process of that paperwork administration. So when we talk about administrative burden, and especially for the private providers, in regards to being able to make a choice in regards to what FTE and what human capital am I going to leverage, would I rather leverage it towards classroom improvement and quality education for a child, or do I want to have another person on my administrative staff to process the CCAP and food program as well? It's a tough choice. Diane already touched on it. If you don't enjoy a nonprofit status, you have limited resources available, and there are tough decisions to be made. One of the other things that I would want to call out that is, I think, a fantastic improvement from a child perspective is the consistency of care that the 12-month contracts are provided. That has, I think that single-handedly has done as much for the quality experience that a child receives and the program that their parents choose for them as any other policy that we've put in place in the last 7 or 8 years. So that does work well.
Thank you. And panelists, my understanding is this mic, you need to love it. Get in there close to it. Yeah, get in there and rock sing it. You can do it. It'll help those on the webinar here.
Okay, I would like to respond to that a little bit too. It's been our experience, even as a nonprofit, that the administrative burden in administering billing, both for CCAP and CCCAP also, but that's actually a separate conversation. We have had that experience as well, but we also need to remember that there's actually 2 populations of families that we're dealing with here. And the low-income CCAP families, that having the 12-month period has really helped them. But there's also the TANF CCAP families, especially the ones that are transitioning from training into work. And those time frames that are generally put in there are maybe 3 months at a time. And it's extremely confusing to families. I have CCAP, but then you have to go, well, but I don't have CCAP because I don't have a 12-month period. But I have 10, but I don't know who to report to. The layers that go into that are confuse families and providers. And if you don't have that sophistication to understand which funding your child is getting assistance from, and your family's getting assistance from, it can defeat, people just throw their hands and walk away.
One more thing that we've done for county and different counties, which is, I can always speak for our county. We've created kind of an additional training program for our providers, rather than just, here's your POS training, have fun with it. We do what we call Provider 101, 201, and 301 series that we just implemented this year with our providers, where we have them come in and do some additional training on how to maximize CCAP for them, and go over more of the background of the program, some more of the things they may not necessarily get just from a POS training or the interaction they have with the billing department. So we found that it's been pretty successful so far, and we'll be doing a 201 series actually at the end of this month with some more providers and directors, and it'll go more into the how to make sure that you're billing correctly, how to make sure that, how do you determine if they're going to be on for 6 months or they're going to be on for 12 months or they're going to be on for a month, and what to do, and more taking a proactive approach to training the providers and then also letting them know that they're not alone in it. So, just really just making it, like she said before, that time where we're hitting everybody. But I'm really excited about the provider series of training, and I'm looking forward to the spring will be the 301, which will hit on more of the social emotional and dealing with families in crisis and dealing with our low income families who may not be what they typically see from their families and their children.
Great. Anybody else on the panel want to speak to what supports you being able to continuously support and enroll children in CCAP?
For Weld County, we do have one person who is point of service, if you will, for all providers. They know to contact one person who that they have available to them for any impromptu POS training. We will provide POS training typically once a month for new providers, but besides that, anytime there's a new director, we go out of our way to actually be available for them. And like I said, we have a lead in Weld County who is the point person for any issues that a provider might have.
Great. I was going to wait until the very end of the panel to open it up to the group for any kind of reflections, additions. But I just made a game-time decision. Let's pause after each section of questions. And we'd love to hear, are there things that anyone in the room would like to add to this conversation or ask the panel about what works well or where there are challenges for really being able to have the capacity to serve children and families? And you'll go ahead and reintroduce yourself, and if it's directed to a panel. Okay.
So I'm Lisa from Adams County. We've been having lots of these discussions in our county about how to make things smoother both for families, the department, and providers. And one of my questions would be, I love the training that you're providing for your providers. I think that's fabulous. What do you do for families to really help them understand the CCAP process and their responsibility in that, and making sure that they know the importance of swiping cartridges? Does that fall on the provider more to make sure that they get that orientation? And that's to anyone.
I'll start. Initially, for new clients, we spend quite a lot of time actually reviewing what the POS device is. The simple way to use it, because there's really only 4 areas that they need to do, but we spend a lot of time in Weld County. Again, I have another person who's available that clients can call in at any time. Initially, like I said, we do the training, and then what we do ask is providers to at least spend with new clients at least the first 5 days with them, helping them out. And we've got a lot of information as well, and cheat sheets that they can actually review at any time to help them out. Is that an answer?
Anyone else want to field that?
Well, from a provider perspective, we do psychology enrollment, so our enrollment department works with families to help them learn how to use the machine and how important it is and do all the swiping and everything that happens. Our center directors don't do anything with fees, like money or anything like that, but each center has an administrative assistant, and that person works with families to help them understand the importance, monitors swipes, monitors whether they're getting them done, follow up, a little system we have in place so that we're tracking them down in portal. But from the administrative side, again, it takes a lot of, it's a real administrative extra, if you will, to do that, to keep your center directors from having to do that every day and not be able to spend time with the teachers.
This is going to sound like a broken record, I suppose, too, but I think we have to keep in mind that the families that are eligible for CCAP are juggling a whole lot of balls all at once in their lives. And not to say maybe everybody in this room is juggling a lot of balls, right? But I think there's just some added challenges to a lot of the families that we're serving. And I don't know how much training actually sticks with them. You heard Diane just use the word monitor, and you heard Noel talk about 48 hours a week, 40 to 48 hours a week. I know that years ago, Joe back there and I calculated that we were spending at least $50,000 a year in staff time to do what you're hearing my colleagues talk about here. And that's not incorporated into the reimbursement rates, which is, I think, something we want to think about the next time the market rate study and all that is done, is actually to take a look at the administrative cost to the provider, particularly a larger provider. I actually wonder if it would be worth at some point, I don't know if we can figure out how to do it with the data, this big red stuff, rather job. So I think it'd be really interesting to look at whether or not continuity for a family and a child is any different based on the capacity of the provider to manage the complexities of some of the administration of this program, or whether or not families are more likely to give up and walk away, or are they actually, and also how they're looking at what the county's, practices are as well. It's an interesting study to look at.
Great. And I have a question from a webinar participant, so we'll factor that in now, and then we'll come back to the audience. So Matt Alcon asked, when you think about contracting for CCAP slots, what facilitates or supports counties to be able to contract for CCAP slots, and what causes any hesitations or reservations when it comes to contracting for CCAP slots?
In Boulder County, we've actually thought about doing it quite a bit. Right now, child support, we're not going to do it until child support. The system just won't, it's too much work. We already have shifted our administrative, where we're doing a lot more administrative stuff with families, and that would just be too cumbersome. But I think contract for slots is a great theory. I'd love to see it in practice, but right now, it's just the way task works.
Any other perspectives on that from any counties in the room?
We don't do it.
Great. Is there another question here?
Hi, this is Jenny Pinchot with Colorado Counties, and I really appreciated that one of the earlier comments about a change in the philosophical approach to CCAP. And I am sure most people are familiar with this in the room, but I think it bears repeating because it's important to have in the back of your mind about the sensitivities of counties and how we operate. There were comments made about looking at CCAP as something other than just a work support system. And so much of the counties and what we do is dictated to us by federal laws that are not just CCAP, but they're TANF oriented. And they're coming from, other perspectives. And one that I think about is under the TANF program, we have to meet work participation rates. It's a federal standard that we are measured against. And part of, getting people employed is having them have CCAP. So I like to remind myself of some of the drivers that are kind of bumping up against the wall of a philosophical change are often coming from federal regulations and other programs we administer. And that is not a choice, right? These are things we have to do, and it's things that we're accountable for. So it's just a sensitivity to have and just be aware of. And I don't consider myself an expert in human services, so I would invite Nan or Chuck or anybody else who wants to chime in on that piece. Again, it's just a sensitivity.
My name is Chris Robart, and I have 2 child care centers. I'm a private provider in the Aurora area. And when we think about serving the children, and you guys brought up a good question originally, one of the things that really drives home for me is the continuity of care and how difficult it is to continue to provide that continuity of care when we have challenges getting parents to bring their children on a daily basis. And it sounds like some of the same challenges you guys talk about facing there. And I feel like if there was more of a way that the county could work with the family and the provider to help the family and the provider to understand how important it is for that child to show up every single day, because the administration is expensive, but taking that expense out of it, it's more expensive when we don't have children that are getting continuity care. It's a long-term expense that we're not seeing the benefits of. And it seems to me that something around that would really help the child care centers in doing that. And the other struggle that I have with it, and I work with my directors quite frequently, is that typically the children that need it the most are the ones that have the hardest time with it. And it's easiest for the director, when we don't have the administrative support and stuff like that, to want to get rid of that child, is the terminology that they typically use, because of the challenge it puts on them as managers when they have so many other regulations, so many other things they're trying to follow. And that to me is why it becomes very important to talk about continuity of care. We talk about children served, how frequently are they actually attending the child care, and what can we as providers, as counties, and as parents all work together to impress that importance of continuity.
Any reflections or?
Continuity of care is something we talk about a lot. With autism in early childhood, and I'm curious, and I absolutely know there's no simple answer to this, but from your perspective, what are some of the major buckets, if you will, of reasons why families are not bringing their
Sadly, when I talk to the families, the number one reason is they view it as a babysitting convenience service, and they do not view it as an education. And because of that, they don't understand the importance of your child coming to school every day. I mean, there's so many aspects of routine, for example, and then, later on one of the questions comes up for turnover of staff, like, you can't get a child in a routine, you're now making it that much more difficult for the staff, you're making it that much more difficult for the director. But sadly, the most common reason is they do it as a babysitting service and not as an education. And then the other reason is that there's no penalty. So nothing happens to one of my parents if I say, if you don't continue to come every single day on a daily basis, I will have to disenroll you. That doesn't work, because they'll just go to a center next door. If I say, I'm going to have to charge you for that day, that doesn't work because they don't have the funds to pay for it anyways. And so I like to use the last resort, because I don't really think threatening is the best approach, but the worst part of it is that there is no end consequence. There's just call up Arapahoe County and say, I'm switching to a different provider. Within a couple of days, they're at a new provider doing the same exact thing. And really, that's creating more administration costs for a different provider and not just enroll a new child.
Great, I think Diane.
I think we hear a lot about transportation becomes an issue. I think the families getting there. I want to reiterate again what Charlotte said, is that there are lots of challenges, that families that are living in poverty are facing lots of challenges that may or may not be faced by me. If I have a flat tire, I call AAA. If one of my parents has a flat tire, the whole world stops. So I think we have to understand that there's some different perspectives to this, and how are we creating some other systems that support them. It's not easy. I'm not saying I have the answer, but I think the reality is there are all kinds of things that happen, and so it happens.
Okay, so we're going to go back to a couple more questions directed to the panel, and we'll take a break after those and turn it back over to the audience. So this next round of questions is directly around equity across counties. Stakeholders at the August meeting touched on what a statewide system looks like and how we think about variation in local policies. So we'd love if the panel would help us go a little bit deeper. How do variations in benefits across counties impact you and or those who you serve or support? What solutions or recommendations might you have around balancing the tension between statewide equity and local decision making? Hot topic. Who would like to start?
Well, it's convenient, but it's also critical. The low-hanging fruit is the discussion around reimbursement rates. With multi-site providers especially, it's very difficult imagine if you're running your own business and you have a 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old is in one county and the provider is getting about 49% of the market rate, and you operate another center in an adjacent county and you're getting 78% of the private market rate. So there is a huge disparity in regards to philosophically what that same child, they get the same type of program, the same high level of quality program, but from a provider perspective, you are getting almost 30 to 40% less, depending for the same child's experience, depending on what county you're in. Now, when you marry that up against the market private pay rate that you're paying parents, again, private pay centers have no additional income, no grants, no outside funding sources, no additional revenue streams. So you have to make a decision as a provider for the social good, for the health of my business, for the reasons that I was drawn into early childhood, my passion for providing service and support to families. There is a business decision to balance the books, frankly, that says, can I afford to basically take 2 CCAP children, the expenses associated with 2 children, and only receive, at the end of the day, revenue for the same revenue for 1 private pay child. It's almost a 2-for-1 proposition. And that's very difficult. Now, we have made great strides. Another thing that's working well with the point of sale service system is in regards to reimbursement and timeliness. But as with any private business, cash flow is a major consideration for administrators. And when I will tell you, and this is not an embellishment, 5 years ago, with the company I was working for, we had over $500,000 out in 30, 60, 90 days. That was built. Now, that dynamic has greatly and vastly improved since we went to the point of sale system. But when you talk about trying to chase down absences with families coming in every day, you're trying to spread your staff in the morning in regards to, we talk about monitor versus, really collaborating with families. It becomes more of a compliance issue because, again, an average center could have $5,000 to $6,000 out every 2 weeks that they're waiting on getting paid that directly goes to providing direct services to the families that they serve. So I'll let someone else have the mic with that.
Something I would add to this conversation, I think we, here in our 2 facilities are in Denver. One of them is now by DIA, so it's kind of close to Arapahoe, close to Adams as well. But we, generally speaking, have not seen a lot of issues with differences in what's happening from county to county. For us, I'm only speaking for us and what we see. But something that is beginning to become apparent to us because we now also have an early head start child partnership grant. It means we are now serving kids not only here in Denver, but we're also through partnerships serving children in several other counties of the state. And we're finding that the, I guess philosophy is the right word maybe, our decision-making is happening county to county around whether or not you can blend and braid or stack or mash together more than one funding stream for one child for a day. We're finding a lot of differences still out there in how people see that. In some cases, people are saying, oh, well, of course, no one of these funding streams pays for a full day, so let's not get so wrapped up in the bureaucracy of it all that we get stumbling block. Let's just go ahead and allow more than one funding stream. Whereas other places are saying, now look, they're already getting money from this funding stream, they should be able to get money from another funding stream at the same time because that's both double dipping. So I think a lot of conversation that still needs to be held there as we move forward with more and more opportunities for working together between providers and county administrators to think about that in terms of more statewide around those kinds of, I guess, philosophical things.
I just wanted to talk about in Weld County, what affects us is when another county might have a waiting list. That would affect us as well as the federal poverty level. It's a different level. And of course, like Noel had just mentioned, also the difference in provider rates.
Can you speak about what about a waiting list in another county, how that affects you?
If another adjacent county will have a waiting list for CCAP, we've experienced in Weld County where the client will move in our county.
So families will move to access the service. Thank you.
So I found in doing this work for a really long time is that if you don't blend, braid, mash, stack, do something, you're not going to be able to, yeah, you're not going to stay in business. And I spent the hour before I got on the road to come up here on the phone with the bank about our renewal of our line of credit. Because you are working with cash flow, it doesn't, I mean, it's constant. You're waiting for funding from any number of funding streams in order to make payroll on Friday. And is that going to happen? And so for us, the tiered reimbursements have been very beneficial to our organization. We're taking every bit of the tiered reimbursement income and putting it into personnel. Every single bit of it is going in salaries because turnover is critical to quality and it's critical to this industry. And so, but we have got to figure out how to be able to do some of these things. In particular, if we're talking about early head start child care partnerships, they're going to keep happening and it's a good thing. But we have to figure out how to let providers, how to help providers work with other funding organizations to make this happen more seamlessly. Because we don't need to be on the phones trying to figure this out over and over and over again.
So I thought this was an interesting question that really made me think a lot about sort of equity in different senses and kind of how this question is framed. Because, you know, I do think that in some sense it's some of the variations, I think as we are calling them, variations that are allowing us across the state to provide more equity in access to the program. And having the local county be able to really determine and identify what's going on within their community, everything from cost of living, which varies so significantly across the state, to the types and range of providers that are available across the state, to what the composition of the community and the clients are in terms of whether you have kind of a larger segment of your population who are accessing higher education or other potential work supports and what that might look like. So, you know, I think from our perspective, while there can be some challenges with those variations that we hear about,
I think we also feel like that's really a huge asset to the program. And it does allow us to create that equitability where you might have a family. I mean, our big experience in Boulder County is that a family who's trying to make ends meet in our county looks a lot different than a family trying to make ends meet in perhaps Lincoln County. And so it's really important for us to be able to have some flexibility. I think when we look at the provider rates, even within our county in Boulder County, we have segmented our provider rates because we have a huge variation from the city of Boulder, as you can imagine how much it costs to provide care in the city of Boulder, to the eastern edge of Boulder County, and what the cost of care is in Longhorn. So I think that's an important way to look at equity and how we can provide equity across the state by having some fluidity.
From a parent perspective, there's also some issues around what different counties require for documentation. Who gets what documentation at what point in time? And it especially affects the parents who are, so to speak, graduating off of TANF and onto CCAP, because the document they presume, and it also happens to families who are moving from county to county, they presume that County A is actually talking with County B and forwarding information to them, or that the TANF worker is actually in communication with the CCAP worker and forwarding information back and forth. Nobody tells them that's not the case. Also, the documents required for TANF, for eligibility for TANF, are different from CCAP. And again, nobody seems to take responsibility in clearly communicating that to the parent and giving them a list. Hey, you're graduating off of TANF, you're going to be going on to CCAP, you will have to fill in more paperwork. There are things that are slightly different. I can't transfer this information for you. All that communication that leads to continuity of care doesn't happen from the parent's perspective. From a provider's perspective, that means that you have a child that has a deadline at the end of the month. You told them at the beginning of the month, the middle of the month, the week before the end of the month. And the parent is standing there looking at you going, I don't know which worker needs what. That gets really confusing for a parent, and understandably so.
Great. So to open it up to everyone in the room, what have you seen work well in promoting equity across the CCAP program in Colorado, and what else would you like to see? Comments, reflections, or questions?
Well, I just wanted to say that one of the solutions then, the recommendations would be to better our communication across the board, better our communication with providers, with our existing CCAP customers, with other counties, share our rates, share our federal poverty level, and really have really good rules in place so we have open communication. So I do have, my friend Jenny, I can just leave. I think it's interesting and I think it's helpful to see what different counties are doing in terms of the eligibility requirements. So I have the spreadsheet that shows what every county is doing, and I think what's striking to me is that there's actually a lot more consistency than you think that there's going to be, which is interesting. And then the other thing that was surprising to me is that many counties are allowing for 4 years of education and training, which I think was surprising. Anyway, I'll put these out on the table there and we can start. Thank you.
Lisa again from Adams, and I think one of the things when I think about equity is choice of provider for families. And what I see is we've got some major rock stars in our community who will take a high number of CCAP, but not every provider in our community is willing or able to take CCAP. We have a lot of our family childcare home providers who find it too burdensome. And there are some that are willing to, but when I find a family, we had a center closed down that was a majority of CCAP. And those families went to these places and they were already full. These families couldn't just go to the next place down the line because they didn't take CCAP. And so what I would see from an equity perspective is that families would get to choose where their child went. Based on location, something close to home, based on high quality. They basically are taking any slot that's open to them. And we don't have enough slots in our community to really fill that need, and especially the variety of different kinds, whether it be a school district preschool, whether it be a center, whether it be a family shelter home. We just don't have enough variety for families to choose from.
Any other comments, questions?
Well, I live in El Paso County. We had, there were about 480 family childcare homes, and we had 280 that had contracts with the Department of Human Services or CCAP before the POS system went in. And when the POS system went in, we then had 76 homes that had contracts. And then with the latest market rate survey, because of low participation at family childcare homes, our rates dropped. They went lower than they were before. So we are trying to find out, but we don't even think we have now even 76. We may or may not, we may, but we're not sure. And I know we work with homes, and some of our homes are saying we'll have a contract, but we'll only take one child or two children. I think what we need to think again to equity, but we need to make sure that families have choice. And if we're relegating families to only one choice, then it's not a choice. And it's not always best for children to be in center-based care or to be in family childcare homes. But as we think about the changing the workforce and people who are working shift work and weekends and evenings, centers are typically, I don't know about any, we're not doing it. We can't afford to do it. We don't have enough kids to do it. We're going to have to build some other systems of support for families if we're going to meet the needs of those parents and those children in a different kind of way. And we're going to have to somehow take a look at capacity for those vulnerable children through our CCAP program. If we don't, we're doing a real disservice to those children and those parents. What do I really think?
This is Bill from the Children's Campaign. I think one other sort of fascinating piece of this dialogue about balancing local knowledge and decision-making over what community needs relative to the question of equity is local decisions impact the other local communities. And so, to your point, Anna, about communication, about how one county's decision over eligibility, rates, what dollars can be spent locally for what purposes, has implications in a finite pool of resources for what other counties can and can't do. And so how that plays out, that local knowledge, how do I tailor a program to meet local community needs, is not a decision that is truly made in isolation, because it has implications for end-of-year closeout, for the allocation formula, for therefore families and children's probability of being able to access quality depending on where the zip code they're born into. So I think that that's a tension in the program that I think needs to ongoing attention.
I just want to share something too. But I'd like to see also, like Well, Larimer, and Boulder, neighboring counties get together. The three of us, we get together once a month, and we have what we call a tri-county meeting. And we share policy, we share ideas, and we share processes. And I'd like to see more neighboring counties do the same.
Thank you. Now we'll turn our attention to quality. We'll have a couple conversations all around quality. And then it'll come back up to the whole group. So there's been a lot of work over the past several years to increase the quality of childcare. How have you seen CCAP support quality improvement, and what opportunities do you see to further this work?
I already said the tiered reimbursement. I think tiered reimbursement was very helpful for us, for those of us who are working in college shines and trying to achieve some different levels of quality, and seeing different kinds of reimbursement rate, tiered reimbursement rates to help us support that. As I said, all of our revenue from the increase on the tiers is going to go to personnel. I don't think we're just not going to survive if we don't start doing something around recruitment, retention, and compensation. And so we're going to see an industry that's even going to go a little bit more down the hole and do something. So that's how it's supported the work that we're doing in our organization with our family child care homes through wages, salaries, benefits, kinds of things that are going to benefit the employee base.
I'm very excited about the initiative that is launching in Colorado around the workforce. I think it's high time that we started looking much more deeply into those issues. We've made a lot of progress here in Colorado. When you start talking to other states, you begin to realize there's so much progress we've made here. This little state out in the west, and the rest of the country thinks nobody exists between the Mississippi River and California. And here we are, doing some pretty fabulous work together around our core competencies for professionals in this field, around our new Colorado Shines system, around trying to bring much more capacity around coaching, really looking at what's happening with teacher preparation in higher ed. All of those things, I think, are incredibly positive in this state, and while they're not directly related necessarily to CCAP, they're going to benefit children who are receiving subsidies from this program. At the end of the day, though, even for us, we're finding that, I was put out there, latent early learning seems to be known by our school district partners as the best place in town to recruit teachers from. And so we're having a very high rate of teacher turnover right now, much higher than we typically do, because they can pay them more. And so we're going to have to, if we really, really, really expect to change permanently what's happening with quality in this part of the early childhood world, we're going to have to address the compensation issues one way or another.
One of the challenges we face in Boulder County is with our providers. We don't have a huge amount of providers across the board, period, and then we don't really have a huge amount that take CCAP. And what we hear from a lot of our providers is we don't need to take it. They're full. They're always full. They have their wait list. They get high-paying families to pay their full rate, so why should they take it? So that's been a big challenge for them. A lot of them just like, I don't want to go to Colorado Shines. I don't need to. So a lot of education, we're working with our local council on trying to educate the providers about the benefits that they can receive by going through Colorado Shines, and also the intrinsic benefits of accepting CCAP families. We created a campaign called Just One More, where we asked them to just either take one family or one child or one more CCAP spot, and then working really closely with them for them to have success with that CCAP family. So that's been one of the challenges and also successes that we've been seeing. We have quite a few school-age programs that just don't rate in the Colorado Shines program too, so I'm trying to work with that as well. It's been difficult.
For Weld County, we started our tiered reimbursement in January this year, but we'd like to see pass legislation to allow counties to use its CCAP dollars on quality activities as defined on the CCCAP Act in collaboration with Early Childhood Council. Weld is currently working with the community partners and Early Childhood Council to create tiered reimbursement for school-age centers and school-age sites.
Great, let's talk, so thanks for bringing that up. Let's talk a little bit more about that. If other panelists want to share, or folks in the room, there are different perspectives about using direct service CCAP dollars for quality, to be able to use CCAP allocations for local expenditures on quality. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what folks think are the advantages of this and what you see as potential unintended consequences. And I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit more about what the benefits you see and any unintended consequences, and I'd love to hear from other folks.
Right. Well, we're still actually currently working with community partners and Early Childhood Council to create that. And we're also wanting to create a tiered reimbursement quality structure for family, friend, and neighbors.
So what are some things you would do? What are some things you intend to do?
So I'll talk about it for just a second, I think, from my perspective. And as I shared with Jody earlier, this is my 29th year of experience with child care subsidies in one way or another. And I think there's always going to be a tension between the quality and how many kids can we serve, how we define serve, right? And I think we're hearing now that with the implementation of tiered reimbursement, with the implementation of some of the other new policies or revised policies in the CCAP program, that counties who have never had to have wait lists before, now we're seeing them come up, wait lists, and having wait lists. And we know that in and of itself is a major tension at the local level, and at the same time, how do we ever make a case that we don't have enough subsidy money in this program unless we can show data around unmet need, right? So I think my own personal perspective, this is my personal perspective, that as we're talking about whether or not we have sufficient dollars in Colorado to actually meet that need for the families who need the subsidy to go to work or go their training, whatever it is they're going to do. I have a hard time with saying that it would be okay at the local level to make the decision to take subsidy money and put it into quality if somewhere else in the state people are waiting in line, for a subsidy. So it's a tough question. And at the same time, I also believe, I've been in Colorado 10 years now, and understand the local perspective much better in this state than I did when I came here. I will say I'm still learning a lot about it. I appreciate all the education about it from my colleagues around this room. I do think there's a lot of value in one community versus another, looking at what for their community makes the most sense in terms of quality improvement initiatives, what they need to work on in their own local community. So it does feel like there should be some allowability for local determination around that, but I don't know that I can sign on to it would be okay to take something and put it in quality. One of the other things that crossed my mind as I was looking at the questions is from a policy perspective, with all the, well, from my perspective, I read it in the paper, all the movement towards raising the minimum wage, which could have an unintended consequence of bumping families off of CCAP or forcing them into a spot where they have to tell their employer, oh, by the way, don't give me a raise because I'll lose my CCAP and I can't work. And I think we need to think about how we are going to structure eligibility if minimum wage goes up substantially. Because it comes down to the family's budget, but it also comes down to their ability to work if they make too much money for CCAP.
So I think I've already talked about the importance of the local options and local flexibility, which I think is critical in administering the CCAP program. We're county value and other counties do too, but we are really challenged with the need, I think, not just in our community, but I think across the state for the benefit services, for CCAP services. And we're seeing that more and more with the changes in the program, and we're kind of shifting from a place to where we have been underspent as a state to now we sort of hit the bullseye this year, which I don't know, that may never happen again, we were pretty darn close. That's a good thing. That means that people are getting connected to the benefits that they need to transition to self-sufficiency. And we haven't seen real detailed data, but the data that we saw from the state at the last meeting is that perhaps 15% of the folks across the state who are eligible for the benefit are getting it. And that is probably not, does probably not mean that 85% out there are knocking on our doors, but it does mean that there are probably a lot more people who do need a benefit. And we know, in Boulder County, we've been looking at all of our local data, and that childcare for a family of four, childcare is it's the biggest expense for the family. And you probably know how much it costs, housing costs in Boulder County. It's expensive. And childcare is well above the cost of housing. And I think that's probably true in other parts of the state. I know we're not alone here. And in addition, when we look at our families, when they come through and we're working in case managing with them, and we do our self-sufficiency risk assessment, childcare comes up about transportation, about employment, about food, about health access as the greatest risk that our families are facing. What that means is that they are not able to access consistent care, they're not able to access care for the duration that they need, the type of care, or they don't have reliable care, and we really need to, I think, continue to work on the quality initiatives that we have put in place recently. We know we're just getting the hang of them, and we're just getting to understand what that's going to look like across the state. Certainly counties are just getting adjusted to that. From a budget perspective, we're just getting adjusted to that before we start to pull out dollars from an allocation formula for another purpose. And I think that's the perspective that we have. However, we know that FFN is a huge service in our communities, and we do need to think about how we can get more dollars remaining to support and provide some more consistency and supports for those types of services. And we've got great relationships in our county with our early childhood council, and perhaps there's an opportunity to get some more resources to them to put more of those types of supports in place. That's really so.
Okay, so we'll open it up to folks if there's any reflections or additions that you want to add to the conversation about quality. And I'm going to start with somebody from the webinar. John Cruz shared, counties could use CCAP dollars for quality. Counties could transfer TANF dollars to help fund this through their TANF transfer. That was a thought and recommendation from John Cruz. Can you read that again? Yes. If counties could use CCAP dollars for quality, and counties could transfer TANF dollars to help fund this through their TANF transfer. Go fund child care. Quality.
I wonder if he means to that, does he maybe do that? Does he mean to then sort of backfill the dollars and put some subsidy into quality? Or does he mean use $10 for quality?
He said yes to the first option.
First option, to backfill.
So TANF reserves perhaps?
Into subsidies, backfill what was taken out for quality. Yeah, so you guys, you don't have as much. Yeah.
Hello guys, I'm Dan Sandy from Houston County. That's Aspen Snowmass area. Thanks everybody who's serving. I'm a little disappointed that there's no one from the West Slope and there are no small counties represented. We have a totally, not totally, I can relate to everything you guys are saying, but we have a different story here. So, I'm going to keep reading. Hard to be on the mic. Hi Rita. She's on the mic. I just, two things. One is a reminder that small counties are capped with TANF reserves at $100,000. And the other is for us, if you all start using your CCAP for quality, I cannot serve the families I serve. And I know, I just really appreciate all of the dialogue there's no easy solution. We do work with Eagle and Garfield. They're our partners, and we all have different thresholds, and we all pay different amounts. We just have really different needs in each county. So I just want to encourage the concept of maintaining flexibility, improving the allocation statewide, so that those who have been overspent year after year after year get addressed. And that if we're going to look at solutions like TANF, we need to have conversations about small, medium, and large, because we have very different sets of expectations and needs. Thank you so much for serving on the panel.
I want to let Ann know she's not alone. Round County is here. And we certainly share a number of the same issues. And I think for Round County, the concept of 185% of FPL in Round County is an entirely different animal than 185% of FPL in many of our eastern slope counties and other poorer counties. So Round County will certainly lobby for some kind of local adjustment that more accurately reflects the cost of living, because we're not able to serve the number of kids that clearly have a need. And really our FPL should be set at 225 or 230 or 240 to have a more accurate reflection of the need.
Thank you.
Two more, and then we're going to transition.
Chris Roberts. So when I think about the quality and kind of compare that to the variation or the equity that's at stake here, when I speak with the council and other business owners, they always give me a funny look when I say this, but I'm really impressed that I personally would not care as much to have more money sent to my center as I would for there to be better technologies that reduce the administration. I did not get into child care to become an administrative assistant. I got into child care to serve families. And so although the money becomes an easy conversation, everybody wants more money. I always try and say, I still think we should advocate for less administration. And there's lots of technology out there. I mean, Uber took control of the taxi industry by something as simple as a technology. You know, there's got to be other solutions out there. Like most of the stuff these parents apply to CCAP funding are the same things I then have to turn around and collect from them for an IEF form, for their simple enrollment, who's mom, who's dad. Like, there's got to be more ways that the chat system, which has helped phenomenally, but that system can be taken to the next level of getting information to the child care provider without having to spend so much time, energy, and money in administration.
Great. So in a minute, we're going to take a break and then break it, and then we'll actually have small table conversations so everyone in the room really has the opportunity to share voice, perspective, and work together to figure out what the solutions and recommendations that the group would like to put forward. Before we do that, just one last cut at the panel. Is there anything burning that you wanted to share that you didn't have a chance? And we'll wrap up with that.
Not burning, but I will also circulate the document that shows the allocations to counties so that you can see what funding counties are allocated. Great.
I just want to say thank you to everybody in this room, to Mary Ann and her staff, to everybody who's here, everybody who's on the webinar. So 29 years. But this is such a critically important program to the people who would benefit from it, and to those who would like to benefit from it if there was only enough additional money. And yes, if you get great technology, you can save us some money, right? You're right about that. But these conversations are so important, and I really appreciate you from Benton County back there saying, and so the rural areas, because there's so many different perspectives, about this, and yet we're all, I think, sharing the same goals in this room around trying to ensure that families are becoming self-sustaining and children are ready for kindergarten and all those things. So I just want to applaud everyone for being part of the conversation.
I would challenge those that work within the counties. There's no greater investment than getting to know your providers regarding the CCAP and regarding what their role looks like every day, and really have a working understanding of who they are, what they're about, and the positive difference that they make in the lives of the children that they provide care and education for on a daily basis. We are doing a lot. There's a lot of conversation in the provider community to try to have a better understanding, conversely, in regards to what are the challenges with your CCAP partners in that particular county you work with. But again, huge opportunity moving forward to try to continue to build a bridge and to improve communication, especially from the provider to the county level.
Great. We might have one more comment from a webinar participant.
I can just read it. I didn't see if Anna wanted to read it, but I can just do it. So the final comment from John Cruz is if legislation is passed to be able to use CCAP dollars for quality, it would be an option, not a requirement for counties to use TANF dollars on quality child care activities.
Great. Thank you, John.
Great. So thank you, panel, for appreciate you being up here, fielding some questions, for everybody engaging in the conversation. We'll take a 15-minute break, and then we'll have the next round of conversations with everyone. Thank you.
really very appreciate the panel kicking us off and kind of introducing a number of issues that got a good jump start in their discussion, but now we've got an opportunity to pursue those in greater depth amongst other options. So the way this next part will work, if you've ever attended these CCCAP events, you've had something like what we're about to do. We call this open space technology. So you get to choose the topic, the conversation you want to have. And that term comes from the realization that whenever you went to conferences, you might have liked your conferences, but the open space, the coffee breaks, and things like that, where the real energy was. So that's what we're going to try to create, is a chance for you to have the conversation that you want to have. And the way it will work, in a minute we'll choose which topics those are, but whichever one we choose, we've got a kind of a structure for you. So you just pass out sheets, hopefully everybody got a copy of it. And once you've identified the topic and you're sitting with a group of folks that are equally passionate about that topic, we're going to ask you to go through a few steps and capture them at your tables. And this one is just to see if someone will be a note taker. Someone with handwriting is usually a great criteria. The second criteria is just the person willing to do it. And if you could, as best you can, really be clear on what that topic is. There might be a term that you use, but it might mean something different to everybody that's sat at the table. So spend a couple minutes just making sure, what are we really talking about and what are we not talking about? Try to capture that, take a couple minutes to do that. And then if you can, really look at what's the story behind this issue, what's the root cause of it. So the important step, instead of just jumping right into the solutions, because if you don't figure out what's really going on with it, sometimes it'll pick you down a path that you didn't need to go. So if you spend a few minutes looking at what's behind this, what else is going on, where has there been progress made, then going after some of the solutions and possibilities, we're really trying to focus on this recommendations as the big outcome of these 3 meetings. So if you find yourself just needing to vent, we totally understand that. You can kind of turn the corner on the venting into what would we do about it, what would make this better. That's really the ultimate goal of the process. And then the final process, the final question or the kind of lens to bring to it is, all right, great, we've got a couple of ideas, but what if we went down that road? What would be some of the potential unintended consequences? How might that interact with some other parts of the system that we didn't necessarily intend to do? And it's kind of a check on the solution to see if it's something that we really wanted to offer or if there might be more to it than you thought. So that's the structure that will help kind of guide you through the topic once you've identified it. Hopefully makes general sense, pretty clear worksheet there for you to follow. So when it comes to the topics, one source of these, obviously, is what you've already identified in the first meeting, a good list of juicy topics that's on the handout that was already on your table. I give you a chance here in a minute to kind of come volunteer to be the person to kickstart that conversation. So I come up to the front, so I might say, I'm really excited about this technology question. I really love to see these folks and figure out how can we improve the technology to make it easier on all of us to support them. And I'm going to sit right over there, and that's the conversation we're going to have at that table. The next person would come up. I want to talk about something that's not on here. I heard a theme of communication amongst all the departments. I really like to foster that. I'll be sitting right here, and you can then choose, and Jody will track all these. So you can kind of see what are the topics that people want to dive into. They're going to try to generate recommendations about. If you see one you like, just join that conversation. If you don't see one you like, there's another one. Hopefully there'll be 10 or 12 tables around this room, busily diving into these issues and generating great recommendations for making the CCAP better. Does that make general sense? All right. Is there anyone who would like to propose the topic? Come forward and explain which one you're going to help host to the table. It's always nice to be the first one, so when they please clap. I would like to host the topic. This is why you're here. You came to work on this issue. You want to make it better. This is where that balance gets tipped between social embarrassment and knowing that you stuff you're dying over. It's truth. Everything's correct. All right. I'll do this.
We want to talk
Yeah, you want to tell a little more what drives you about that? What's going to happen? What do you want to see come out of that?
Most I want to see reduced administration through technology-based analysis. Yeah.
Right, so that's what we have here. Hey, Chris, no, we at least have one conversation. Oh, what's on your mind? What do you want to work on? What recommendations are needing to be generated?
We talked a lot about market rate survey at the first meeting. We've got our data expert here.
Anyone interested in hosting a market rate survey? Topic conversation. No interest. Some negotiating going on. You said. We don't have to force it. Tell me, is it you have so many things you want to talk about, or waiting for someone to host a party? Communication by mail, and what's going back?
Well, I would like to talk about allocations, but I really feel like I need the right people. Hello, people on the phone. It's Nan again, hi Rita. So I would really like to talk about allocations, but I feel like we have finance people there, and I'm not sure, I don't feel skilled enough to be, but somehow to talk about allocations and self-sufficiency standard and what it takes and what it costs for childcare. So,
Is there a finance-minded person that would like to attend that? And then we get party? All right, so you just throw a party of people want to come to. So allocations right back here.
But Nan, did you want someone else like a provider in terms of cost? Is that what you're saying?
I think you could call it allocations, the cost. I mean, maybe there's some sort of financial package related to the whole thing. If there are providers who want to join, certainly the cost of care impacts how much we pay you, impacts how much we're overspent, et cetera.
Financing more broadly. All right, so we've got kind of a allocation of financing. We got two juicy ones. Is that all we need, or are there other topics we want to do?
Our field is kind of like an account as well, getting providers to take CCAP.
Several hands. Getting providers to take CCAP strategy. What's behind that? What are the obstacles and what are the possibilities? I'll have it here in the back. Yes.
I would love someone to lead the bucket of how we can all communicate better.
Communication taker, anyone willing to post that one? Parent to provider, provider to county, county amongst each other, kind of improving overall communication. Any? Yeah, yes, scoring once. Communication over there. That doesn't always work. So have someone else host the conversation you don't have. Right, we've got 4. Look up there. Is that why you're here? Are those all, we call them all, are there other topics that you know you want to be a part of this and help generate recommendations for?
I think the stable child care is kind of a big bucket. The stable child care, I mean, I think it goes a little bit what Chris was saying, that how do we get the parents, to really see this figure, but also working with CCAP, where, I've got it where the baby dad is working at night, and I can't get CCAP because they expect him to be watching during the day, and, he's 17 years old, and so that's not really best for the child. So I think the whole bucket is stable child
Corner. Other topics we've got. Those would be big tables, but we can do it. Other topics. We got this. You got in your car, we're disappointed that we didn't have a chance to work on it. Nobody took on. like I'm going to silent auction mode here, auction off the CCAP topic.
I don't want to post this one because I'm going to participate in this one over here, but still I'm thinking along the lines of what Chris, I think his name is, said earlier, along the lines of parent accountability and the children being in consistent care. So along the lines of how we could be proactive to try and educate parents and providers to work with that and get on that train.
Yeah. That is kind of woven into the stable child care discussion. Well, maybe I'll have to revise my rule against suggesting conversations. What else am I doing? Where are we missing? That covers it from the rest of the list.
I don't actually have a host reply, but I do have a suggestion. I can't remember who it was that mentioned school readiness in the context of CCAP, but I'm really interested to hear what kind of discussion we can have about that.
That goes under a larger header of just reframing philosophically the CCAP. That's going to have a lot of energy in that conversation. For anyone who wants to post that one around philosophical shift, kind of paradigm switch from, oh great, all right. I guess this is just how this group works. Go ahead and propose a topic for someone else to host.
I think the stable component overlaps into that.
Okay, so we might start both of those at that table.
Right, because I don't know that I want to force this if there's so many other topics, but I guess what I'm seeing is that they gotta have the provider and the family feeling like this is child care, it's not just, drop off babies.
There's a real learning curve.
Yeah.
Okay.
Aligning separate, but we may end up.
Okay. So that neighborhood back there will be addressing both those last two. That would actually probably work in America. Yes, take one more here.
Well, I think this is actually fall under the philosophical shift conversation in school readiness. But really talking about the impacts of CCAP, both in terms of family self-sufficiency and child outcomes. So how do we really talk about, how do we know CCAP is really going to I think I can follow that table. I just think that's lost in the conversation.
Reaching both goals, both solutions. Other the topics. So the test is I'm asking you to move and join one of those, and if you're not psyched about one of those, you got to propose one that you really want to be a part of. We're going to need your best brain power. Everybody excited about one of those topics? Oh yeah, let's review. So in let's see, this was the technology here. And most, be sure to listen up so you know where you're going. Technology up here, allocation and self-sufficiency standard back here in the corner. Facilitating providers to take CCAP here. Communication enhancement over here. Stable child care and philosophical shift to CCAP towards dual goals over here. And that may split off. Everybody want those conversations? That's all? Okay. Great, go ahead and move to those, please. Again, follow this next slide. Nominated Bill Taylor. We're going to bring topics up this Thanks. Here's how we'll do this share outs. I couldn't get you guys started, now I can't get you started. All right, so as you share out, as you share out, sometimes we just keep talking over a while. Yeah, I know. All right. So as you share out for your table discussion, we're going to be capturing. But first of all, please thank your table hosts that shut their neck out. Oftentimes, listening to conversations. All right, let's do back in a little bit. All right, thanks. We're going to try to capture quick highlights your conversation, any possible recommendations, and then if there's, like in particular, the allocation group is actually going to take a 2-day retreat together. They just finished their introductions on the end of it. It was great. But clearly these conversations probably need to continue, so if there's more resources you need, information, things we can bring next time to deepen those discussions, we'll try to track that too. We'll just try to go around. Please don't feel the need to read every single thing on your sheet. If you can kind of give us the context and some of the high points, we'll capture them here. And then make sure whoever was your note taker would let it collect that sheet before you go. And then, as I said, we'll bounce back and forth. Hopefully, we'll also hear a little bit of connections and overlap between these ideas. And then we'll close with what other steps we need to take to get ready for the real hard work next time of turning these into conversations that people have a chance to polish and so forth. So we're going to hear from everybody, but is there anything you would like to start? Yes. All right. Well, at some point I'm going to pass the mic to Chris because it's going to talk psychology 101. I heard what he said, but I'm not sure I can repeat it. So our topic was technology, and it ended up delving into a lot of communication. So, sorry, communication group, that's why I jumped up and said and then there's another group looking at communication. We talked a lot about how technology can improve communication and how a lot of the problems that providers are having and centers are having are related to the poor communication that can sometimes exist between either the provider in the county or the parent in the county or the parent in the provider. So as far as technology goes, there's many forms, and Chris gave us a list about 100 things long of different things that have to be gathered on each child and each parent. But you include the Head Start form. So the talk centered around how we can share the information so we're not gathering it multiple times. I really do think there's a place for technology. I do want to mention that we are looking at, from a state standpoint, replacing the point of service, POS devices. And we're going to have a new attendance tracking system. And, that's scheduled to roll out sometime probably, in the next year. And that might solve a lot of these issues that we tackle. So I think there are some technology solutions on the horizon. Colin, if you want to chime in on some of the other technology solutions I think that you're part of in
terms of sharing information between P and Colorado Shines and licensing and CCAP. I think those are all important, and then I think we pass it to Chris.
Yeah, I'll just simply say that a lot of the work in the past year has been focused on the points that I bring later on this table. We knew that licensing, quality rating, and child referral all basically use the exact same set of information as migrants, and they have to manually enter them in the separate systems, they have to manually update them in the separate systems. So part of our effort with Colorado Shine was bringing around the table the same people in a single database to look at that data in real time instead of having to send it to each other and update them. And when they just send it back to the family, they call it so they use the current data, not the last time. It sounds like there's a lot of themes around how we can do that better with CCAP and how that aligns to processes that are managed across our office for any license provider, whether it's serving CCAP, whether it's getting licensed, whether it's going through rating and referral. So we want to build on that theme, but I'll pass it out to Chris now.
I'll quickly, because it looks like you're listing off some stuff, talk about some of the things we think that technology can improve before I go into the psychology lesson. One of the things that we talked about would be that the notes in the system that the provider is able to read are actually two-way forms of communication. So the provider could actually put notes back, like a parent didn't pay their parent fees, or to the county, back to the county, sorry, clarification on that. So instead of the communication being one directional, it's actually two directional. And the reason that's important to me is that I think all of us get busy in our day-to-day life, and when you're calling the provider hotline or whatever the different counties have, you have to understand that person on the other side probably has a large caseload, just like you do as the provider, just like the parent does, and all the things that they have going on. And one of the things that breakdown in communication creates is frustration. So we want to work as a unity between the provider, the county, and the family, but it's really hard to work in that unity when the communication is one directional. And so the example that I gave the team here is that there's what's called a drama triangle, which is that you have to have a villain, a victim, and a hero. And in order for that to work, only two parties can be present. And so as a provider, one of the things that we struggle a lot with is that when we talk to the parents, the villain is the county. When we talk to the county, the villain is the parent. And then the piece we're missing is that in order to make that three ways, we have to have that extra layer of communication. And that, to me, is the provider being able to communicate efficiently back to the county so that when the parent calls up the county and says, hey, this is what's going on, the county can make notes that the provider can see. When the provider has an issue with the parent, they can make notes, and we can kind of call everybody out. And as a provider, I think it's important to know that there are providers out there that may be upset with the parents or trying to sabotage them by making nasty grams to the county, but that allows that family to justify their story as well. And you take out that trauma triangle by being able to connect the three dots. So the communication to me between the county, the provider, and the family is crucial. And the email box, I'm sure everybody in here has 100+ of them. And so if you can make that communication direct with the family involved, like I said, for example, being able to go in, select that family, and type a note about that family. That way when the caseworker opens it up, they see something and they can address it with the family as well. So kind of that bridging that gap. So that's why the technology and the communication back and forth to me
I feel like anyone that introduces a technology lesson gets a bonus. It's technology. Who'd like to go next?
Yes, we did have fun in the house, but we decided to spend the night. So we did, it wasn't good for us to do introductions and hear everybody's different positions, because this is a very complicated issue. We decided that really our issue is we don't have enough money to serve all the people who are eligible. That's just sort of the bottom line. 22 counties were overspent this year, and likely more will be overspent next year. And so we have to be looking at issues of what funding do we draw down, and what's the sustainability of the project, and look at the allocation in review. So we talked about all of those things. Obviously, the demand, the impact of the rates, the tiered reimbursement in the marketplace have led us all to overspending. We actually can celebrate that many years ago when the child advocacy groups came to us and said, oh my God, you're underspending by 8 to 11 million, whatever it was. And we're done. We met that challenge, didn't we? So now we're at the other end of the spectrum. So we had some potential solutions. One is that we would like to see a group that would look at how to draw down the federal dollars through the reserve, what the pros and cons would be of that. There's a discussion about whether there is 31,000 or there is 31 million, there isn't 31 million, and how does the state draw down those dollars? Could we actually expand our spending through the legislature? So we'd like to have a group focus on that. Red got us, some of us, to agree that we need to serve on the CCAP allocation committee, which is a subcommittee of finance subpack, which is a subcommittee of capacity. But if we require that if we do that, we need the state to step up and have adequate telecommunication that includes video and sound in here, because rural persons could not get to Denver for a 2-hour meeting. It would be 6 hours to 7 hours of travel. So thank you, Brett, for taking that request forward. And the last is, how do we keep looking at analysis? What's the right analysis, given the fact that every time there's a policy change, all of the counties have different options, and so we're not really comparing apples to apples when we look at each county. But we do think that we need to be looking forward at the expenditures and the options, and look at what all of these options are costing us. And ultimately, our passion is serving families. Anything else? That's you. You know this stuff. Okay, so this group had a robust
I don't want to engage in wrong. So our discussion is around providers. And in terms of possible, we talked a lot about what the root causes are, and from that came up with some potential solutions. So one of the things is we feel like CCAP potentially has a bad reputation for some providers who potentially have been burned along the way, or have heard from a friend to a friend. And so we'd like to think about how we can better communicate the successes that we've had and the policy changes that have happened that actually make CCAP more equally registered on the provider side. So there's been some good things happening that really benefit the providers, and we'd like to make sure that they are aware of those. One of the thoughts we had around solutions that we're actually doing a little bit in Adams County is having providers actually do the outreach to other providers and work with them around how to run a business. With the fact that you've got children on CCAP, so we're not going to do that, but our other two requirements with that was to make sure that we don't leave out that triangle of the department. So how do we not create these lines between this provider and that provider and leave out the county? So kind of an initial outreach and initial engagement that we need to do.
So one of the things that we also recognize is, do we need to get some pros and cons? So thinking about, gosh, so much has changed lately, do we just take a break and let things settle and let families and providers and departments really get their feet under them again before we make more changes? But recognize that there are still changes that need to be made, and we've got such good momentum going that we hate to lose that. So we have some pros and cons with that solution. They're all taking
Thank you.
Basically, we talked about how to improve communication, again, the triangle that we talked about between CCAP counties and families and providers. We talked mainly about provider communication. One of the things that I feel that should be happening for us in our county for sure is shifting from thinking of providers and vendors. And shifting that to partners. So some of the things that possible recognition solutions could be things that we're doing. We have a real strong relationship with our ACC, and I think that's vital for not only for providers to have that strong relationship, but for the county to have a very strong relationship. Twice a year we do what's called a provider forum, where we invite providers to come and provide mini trainings for directors and teachers. Part of that is on CCAP topics, and then we also provide through ECC provide some training that helps them with their quality numbers. All that shines. One of the things that the providers would like to see is a reinstatement of the family orientations. That kind of gone away for years in CCAP. A lot of counties don't do face-to-face interviews anymore. They don't do an orientation, and they feel that education, that initial education with parents is missing. We didn't think there were any possible unintended consequences. One of the things with doing an orientation could be parents have gotten so used to not having to do it. I don't have time to do that, I can't do that. And there's also capacity around what counties have left before, but also looking for other alternatives to providing orientation, either having a provider who volunteer to help with that, or through the ECC. Looking at all the costs.
Oh, wait,
So our discussion focused on the shift of philosophy and also couple the stability in early child care and how we can do that as it pertains to education of 0 to 3. So our topic centered mostly on how do we re-educate families, because that's basically what it has to do with. How do we re-educate families in knowing the importance of 0 to 3, and it's not daycare, as everybody calls it, but there is an education component that children are missing when they miss school, when they're not in a quality center, when they do not have good provider, when we do not have good provider retention, and they are constantly changing providers, that they are really missing out on the educational piece of the 0 to 3. So how do we do that with our families, with our county, with our legislation, with every single piece of government, because it really is a shift in philosophy. We talk about the program guidelines for CCAP as eligibility, when what we are really trying to do is build relationships with families and help them move forward. So that was
a lot of our topic area.
The reason we focus on birth to 3 is that we feel that we probably made great efforts around preschool, around the importance of preschool CCCAP.
Yeah. Well, and that was part of the piece about possible solutions that we really talked about, so we'll jump in there too. The story behind this is, again, the shift from a daycare center and a babysitting service to the real importance and the experience and what promotes that change. How do we actually show families that that change is needed? Is it through experience, through education? What is the best avenue for that? And so then we talk about solutions.
Yeah, so the solutions, again, the reason going 0 to 3, we really feel like Colorado has moved the needle around preschool, right? Our preschool program, and then Denver went with DPP. So we're really looking at investing in that. It took them a lot of marketing dollars, them whoever they were, to market out to the families, hey, your kid should be in preschool, so they're ready for kindergarten. Well, now we know 0 to 3 is just as important, and it's behind if they're not, up to speed by the time they're 4. So how do we do that same type of marketing for 0 to 3? And part of it is having parents demand it. So you think about how K-12 is done, right? The ratings and all that type of stuff. Well, we have Colorado Shines. And I can say that one of the things we've taught our young women at Full Crit is the skill of finding a good quality center when they graduate from high school, because they're going to need it when they go to college or work. And it was easy to call them. Look for at least a 3 or 4 wall stuff. Don't go for less. Here are the questions. Well, we need to now remarket Colorado Shines. And maybe I didn't know how to talk about that. So there needs to be this investment that we all agree in. Here is what is a quality early learning center. And then the other thing is, you have to create these habits within parents of these young kids to get them to come to every day, because those same habits are going to carry forward to kindergarten, first, second, and third. So we have to have people understand 0 to 3 quality early learning centers are just as important as a good preschool program. It's just as important as your grade school, high school, etc. And then we can start to market that, which we need to do and educate. We have to educate our parents so they know how to go out and select a good one. But there are unintended consequences.
So we didn't have a lot of unintended consequences. One thing, and I think the comments that we kind of touched on was, centers can't be fully supported with 0 to 3. There has to be a mix of ages. And so when we move forward and we try and promote education for 0 to 3, there has to be a variable age in all of those centers. So when we promote a certain area, it can't only be fully supported by that. That was a little unintended consequence that might occur. I think that was about all for consequences.
All right, nice work, everyone. Your reluctance to have conversations is not ready to have agreements. So just want to get one more shot at, is there anything that either from your own group or as you heard the others that knowing we're going to try to wrap up the third session next time with some really concrete recommendations, are there other pieces of information or resources that would be useful to have between now and the next session?
I have one. It kind of goes a little bit with what we talked about and then what you guys talked about. So one of the things that I keep thinking about is how do we incentivize some way for providers to take CCAP, especially for birth to 3. We do not have that birth to 3 spots. And so even if you're out promoting the importance of birth to 3, there is not anywhere for these families to go, especially on CCAP. Right, yeah. And so I think thinking about, and we know that even with tiered reimbursement, you lose money on when you make that up in preschool. So I guess I would want to think about, is there a way to, if we're going to go in any of these directions, how do we incentivize that a little bit? Is there a way to use dollars for those incentives? I don't know.
I think one of my concerns with the providers to the constitution that come out of what's already coming out of preschool somewhat is that it's getting harder and harder to fill the preschool slots at child care centers because more and more elementary schools are seeing the money that can be made in preschool And so the unintentional consequence of that is that it's most expensive for me as a provider to offer 0 to 3. And if I can't fill preschool slots because public schools are taking those slots because they know they can make money on those slots, then I'm less inclined to offer more 0 to 3 because those are the most expensive slots to run as a child provider.
I just wanted to respond to that briefly. I think it's a great point, and something that this community really needs to be thoughtful about, the services side as opposed to the school district side, and what are the conversations happening across at the local level between school boards, human services, childcare, community-based providers to avoid the unintended consequences of a good thing, which is pre-K expansion. When you talk to the school districts, they talk about how the most expensive classrooms to run are the preschool classrooms because of things like ratio of group size, good protection for kids, but something that as they wade into that world, it just speaks to the fact that we invest so much in our K-12 system, and they see that as a revenue loss, leaving aside how little we invest in childcare, and we wonder why childcare is so expensive for parents. We do not make any kind of significant public commitment relative. Separate side. I think, to the what comes next and what do we need, Arthur had a conversation about this whole learning community, understanding better the way that the state draws down the federal block grant, what the spending authority for that looks like, the pros and cons of thinking about extending or going further out in terms of expanding the amount that we would draw down in a given year when we think about the sustainability of various initiatives. There's just, I think, a lot of learning that needs to happen, some numbers being thrown around where we're really not, I will speak for myself, I do not fully understand that piece of the pros and cons and the long-term consequences of beginning to think about the immediate pressing need we're seeing in this program, where we're balancing access and quality and the needs of families relative to what resources we have allocated. So some shared learning around that would be helpful.
If Bill doesn't understand it, nobody knows.
Another area of this called exactly research, but it's a conversation. We talked a lot about getting messages to parents and families, and maybe we should work with the ECCC, the Early Childhood Communication Collaborative, which is working on messaging to parents. If we come up with like recommendations of big messages we would like parents to have, we should coordinate that work with what the ECCC is doing, and there's sort of a subcommittee of the Early Childhood Leadership Commission, right? And then there's also the Early Childhood Colorado Partnership that is as well working on communications with families.
Additional resources or things we can prepare for next time? Just looking at the kind of team of coordinators, are there any other kind of next steps that we have from a planning standpoint we want to make sure to touch on?
When's the next one?
October
19th.
October 19th. And it's back in Red Rocks.
Yeah, it's currently at Red Rocks. We're looking at other Denver metro area locations.
So stay tuned about the location.
Probably morning, either 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. Maybe 9 o'clock then.
All right.
Any other? I drove in 2 hours, 40 minutes, just want to know. If it's 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, I either have to stay at the hotel the night before, or I'm going to be super early trying to get here.
The strong lobby for.
So 1 in the afternoon, 1 o'clock.
We'll work on it. we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll stay tuned on the details.
Bill,
Yes.
why would you go back to stay tuned on the date? We might have to.
Okay, so it might be a date question. Okay, stay tuned on the date and the time. So, just stay tuned. We want to make sure we can get as many folks there as possible. All right. So before folks go, just wanted to reiterate that between now and the final meeting, really the goal is as best we can to have as polished and focused and powerful recommendations as possible. So we'll get these notes back out to folks. Be thinking about what you want to bring forward. If there's connections to other partners that would be relevant, please extend that to them. And again, just compliments for the kind of camaraderie and laughter and teamwork that seems to be emerging all these groups. Any other last words for the good of the order? Then bus your tables, pick your waiters, and wait for you guys around table.